One of the remarkable things about regional air pollution, sort of air pollution that blankets the whole basin, is the variety of impacts that it has. It's bad for the lungs, causes lung cancer, certainly exacerbation of asthma. It exacerbates chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, but it also has an impact on other organs in the body. We have some studies in which we've seen associations between air pollution and autism in children, and with a whole variety of other health endpoints that are major causes of chronic disease of modern life.
So here in the Los Angeles Basin, in the general metropolitan area, we have specific problems in the area, particularly of air pollution, particulate matter, which you can think of as little pieces of dirt floating in the air, and ozone, which we're infamous for in Southern California. Those have long-term effects and short-term effects on the people living in this region.
It's been well established by decades of research that exposure to particulate matter is associated with increases in daily mortality, long-term increases in mortality, and in fact, in places where particulate matter has been reduced, you see decreases in death rates, really dramatic decreases.
Across California, there are about somewhere in the order of 7,000 deaths a year that can be attributed just to heart attacks and heart disease from this fine particulate matter, sort of regional particulate matter that blankets the whole area.
It's cancer, it's respiratory health, it's asthma, it's diabetes, and it's cardiovascular health. All of which, by the way, are the top reasons why Americans die, and die early.
Imagine this glass jar represents the air quality in Southern California before rapid population growth during the 20th century. With a dramatic increase in population came industrialization, including manufacturing facilities, refineries, power plants, smoke, fumes, and an ever-growing number of automobiles. Rapid industrial progress during World War II boosted the region's economy and created thousands of good jobs. However, industrialization also brought new waves of smog, and by the late 1940s, air pollution in Southern California had reached critical levels. Something needed to be done. Agencies were formed, regulations were established, and slowly the tide of air pollution began to ebb. Great strides were made during the 1960s, 70s, and 80s with significant reductions in emissions from most all the major sources of air pollution. But there is still more that needs to be done.
Over the last 40 years, almost all of the regional pollutants have decreased pretty consistently. That's a triumph. It demonstrates what we can do if we put our mind to it and make the kind of decisions as a society that we need to reduce air pollution exposures.
So many people think that because air pollution seems so overwhelming, there's nothing I can do. It's sort of beyond me. It's somebody else's problem. It's a big issue. We can't take care of it. But really, the choices you make in your everyday life do affect air quality.
When we consume, when we buy things, we ought to be more conscious about where things are produced, where things are made, but also about the idea of how did it get to my hand? What is the footprint of this item?
Everyone, wherever they live, has the opportunity to impact our environment, to impact the air that we breathe, if you want to say that. And little things help. So one of the things that we discuss here at Loma Linda is lifestyle.
What I tell my parents and the kids is, instead of driving your car to practice, to the games every day, polluting diesel, polluting internal combustion engines, drive an alternative fuel vehicle. Compressed natural gas, plug-in electric, all electric, hydrogen fuel cell, or there's alternative forms of transportation. Take mass transit. Every week I ride my bike to work, 10 miles to downtown Los Angeles. Every week I take the train. We can all do something to reduce pollution from mobile sources and clean up our air and protect the health of all our children.
So we're not necessarily trying to convert people's lives entirely to have them drop a car and pick up a bike. We just want them to address those short distance trips that represent trips to the market, trips to get a haircut, trips to get a local sandwich at a local business. We really want them to start considering bicycling for those short distance trips.
One thing we could do to help clean up the air is be part of the change. I don't think you have to be drastic, but just one day a week. Walk to school with your kids. Walk to the cafe instead of driving. Enjoy our neighborhoods and be out on the streets and sidewalks with your neighbors.
My name is Esteban Gajardo and I take the bus to work.
My name is Sofia Menemelis and I practice sustainability by using compost to grow plants and using water from a rain barrel to water the plants.
My name is Antonio, and I started an idling awareness campaign at my school. So if you have to idle more than 10 seconds, turn off your car.
To reduce our carbon footprint,
instead of buying bottled water, we filter our water at home.
One thing I can do to reduce my carbon footprint, shorter showers.
I parked my gas-guzzling SUV, and I went all electric for a net savings of $200 per month.
Hi, I'm Herb, and I ride my bike to the farmer's market for fresh fruits and vegetables.
I have a sister with severe asthma. Just last month, in 1 week, she went to the emergency room 3 times, and I don't think anyone should have to go through that. I lost an uncle to severe asthma. He went into the hospital claiming that he was having like a minor asthma attack, but he just couldn't control it and never came back out. Nobody should have to go through that. It's inhumane.
I help reduce air pollution levels in my community by taking the bus home, or if I miss the bus, I walk home, like right now.
In the Pino family, we
turn off lights when we leave the rooms.
Today, there are more than 17 million people living in the South Coast Air Basin. Tomorrow, there will be more. Our region needs a strong economy and clean air. So, if each of us can do one thing, make one change in our lifestyle, make one choice that reduces our carbon footprint on the planet, we can have a profound effect on the quality of the air we breathe and the quality of life we live in Southern California. Imagine what we can accomplish if we all just do one thing.
I'd like to call to order the November 6, 2015 meeting of the South Coast Air Quality Management District Governing Board, and I'd like our newly elected council person, Ms. Judy Mitchell, to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Thank you. Please stand and join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Are there any opening comments by any of my colleagues?
Yes. No, okay.
Ladies first.
Ladies first.
All right. I just wanted to mention that last month, the Air Resources Board met here in Diamond Bar, and the day before, a tour was arranged for several of the members of the board to visit the Port of Long Beach and the Long Beach Container Terminal, which is a zero-emission terminal. And I just want to say how much they enjoyed it. And the terminal now is in a testing phase, so they're operating and loading and unloading containers, but the containers are empty, just to test how the facility works. And it's quite an operation to see when you see all these machines running around and going here and there on the ground, and nobody's driving them. So it's all electronic and all computerized, quite an operation. So they were really impressed with it. Just wanted to mention that to all of you. Zero emission goods movement is coming.
Thank you. Mayor Polino?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to let folks know that I really enjoy serving on this board. And unfortunately for me, last night at the City Selection Committee, I lost by about 4 percentage points. Out of 3 million people, it was about 120,000 votes below the level I needed. So I'll be leaving in January, and we'll be working on many other opportunities and things that are out there. And you know, sometimes there's poetic justice, i.e., you know, you work really hard and you benefit. Sometimes you work really hard and things go in another direction for you. But you know, on a level of professionalism, you know, this board is second to none, and staff is just an amazing staff. They can tackle so many different problems and handle them so well. So I hope to continue to be a friend to all of you and to continue to work closely with you in a different capacity. But I just want to state that so folks are aware, Mr. Chair. And thank you very much.
Thank you. Mayor Yates?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I too will be leaving in January on my own accord. But last Wednesday at Sandbag, we elected our new representative to the SCAQMD board, and he happens to be in the audience. It's Mayor Larry McCallum from Highland. Will be my replacement, and I think he will fare well with the staff.
Stand up so we can see you, Larry. There you go.
I thought December was going to be my last meeting, but it isn't, due to the I guess January will be my last meeting. But it's been a hell of a ride, to say the least. But I want to wish Larry the best of luck when you're sworn in. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Dr. Parker?
This last month I went to Sacramento, as everyone knows here, that I'm on the California Hydrogen Fuel Cell Partnership, which I will be the chairman itself of that partnership starting next year. I'm the vice chair now. One of the things that was new that was brought out at this particular meeting, that the stations that approximately 42 stations that are going to be implemented over the next year or year and a half which the majority of them being here in Southern California, is on their way. Most of them are under construction. Certainly have gone out to bid. The cars themselves will be rolling off of the assembly lines very quickly. I understand that we are scheduled to get 2 here at AQMD. And by me being chairman, I should be one of the first ones to get one of those cars. That's a plug-in. But that we are very, very grateful for the fact that, Mr. Chairman, that the California Energy Commission has stepped up and really provided the funds for that infrastructure to come about. And those cars should be out very soon. And the stations to where the people can go and actually have them refilled will be opening gradually. We have one station, as everybody knows here, that is open. We have one at Cal State Dominguez, and I think we have I think it's about 5 or 6, Matt, here in Southern California presently. In addition to that, we were very prominent representative at approximately 400,000 people again this year at the Taste of Soul event that happened in Los Angeles. And Mr. Would you bring up the first slide? It shows our booth and the cars that we had there. One of the, go to the next slide, please. Within that particular booth is an indication of the number of people who came by. And what is very interesting about this, we were informing the public, especially in some of the low-income areas, that they could receive up to $9,500 in vouchers, credit dollars that will be given back to them, and they can buy cars, electric cars, et cetera, that are up to approximately 8 years old. They don't have to buy a brand new car in order to receive that. He's got money. Some of the examples were that cars that now valued at about $11,000 and $9,500 means that those people can be buying those cars for $1,500 with the credits itself and the vouchers that can be given. So I thought that was a very important thing, because one of the things that people are always saying, how can it benefit people in some of the lower income areas, et cetera? This shows, and we are the ones, this agency is the one who is actually processing all of the applications. I think we have now received about how many applications?
2,000.
About 2,000 applications that we are processing. So the next slide, this is a shot itself of some of the people and some of the, I think there's Jim Hill and some of the other people that were there. I was there. I don't know who that guy is in that red shirt that stands out from the crowd. Who's the other guy on the other end over there standing in the white shirt? Dr. Burke.
That looks like Dr. Burke.
And Mrs. Burke, the former congresswoman and supervisor, et cetera, that were there. And that was on that particular day, there was approximately 400,000 people. The next slide, which you can see there. Now, that's actually at one time. This is not over a period of time. All of those people for approximately 1 mile on the street that was closed off on Crenshaw Boulevard. And practically many of them, if not most, came by the booth where we were there at AQMD, and our staff did a superb job.
Were you invited to?
So I want to, I think that was something that we really now have had the outreach at these communities and letting them know that there are subsidies that they can have for cars that they want to buy. So thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and I think it's something that we at AQMD should be very proud of, that we are really getting the word out to people that they can take advantage of these state subsidies.
So, Mr. Chairman, I just want to mention with respect to the program that Dr. Parker just referenced, that at the last ARB meeting, we had an item on the agenda. We had expected $350 million out of the cap and trade funds for these programs, the rebate programs and the EFMP Plus Up program. And we expect that amount eventually. However, as you know, some of that money has been held up in the appropriation process. So we had the item on the agenda approved $90 million for that program. But we do expect in the future we will get the full amount of the $350 million. So I don't know how much money we are actually going to get in our coffers to fill the 2,000 applications we already have. So hopefully we can get that accomplished. Thank you.
Do you have any comments? I got to say that when I went to that event, I was in the events business for a long time, and we used to have 200,000 and 300,000 people at the finish line of the marathon. So when they told me that there would be 350 to 400,000 people on Crenshaw Boulevard, I thought, that's promoters' numbers. Those are not really numbers, right? When I got up on that stage, there were people as far as I could see, and from side to side. I mean, it was just the most incredible vista. So if we do sponsor this next year, I would invite all my colleagues to come down. It's an experience of a lifetime if you only do it once, to see that many people peacefully, having a great time. So, we'll see what happens next year. On the consent item now, Dr. Williams has held items 12, 21, and 34. Are there any board members who would like to hold some items?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, if I could, I need to recuse myself from items involving contracts of those who have made charitable contributions to my employer, Coalition for Clean Air. I am going to recuse myself from item number 3 because Gladstein, Neandros and Associates, Clean Energy, and Southern California Gas Company are potential sources of income which are materially affected by this item. And I will recuse myself from item number 4 because Clean Energy and Southern California Gas Company are potential sources of income materially affected by this item, and recuse myself from item number 14 because the Better World Group Incorporated is a potential source of income which is materially affected by this item. I would like to pull item 2 and item 15.
Items, I'm sorry? 2 and 15. 2 and 15. Okay.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
I have a similar need to disclose that I'm receiving on items 3 and 4, recusing myself because of financial interest in clean energy, which is materially affected by these items. Agenda item 14. While I'm not required to recuse myself from this item, I would like to note for the record that I am a supervisor for the County of Los Angeles.
Supervisor Nelson?
Yes, thank you. Similarly, as to item 14, I do not have a financial interest, but I'm required to identify that I'm a supervisor for the County of Orange, which is involved in the item.
Supervisor Benoit.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do not have a financial interest, but I am required to identify that I'm a supervisor for the County of Riverside involved in the item, and I believe Sunline may also be involved, so I'm going to mention them also.
Council Member Cacchiotti.
Chairman, I also do not have a financial interest in number 14 on the agenda, but I'm required to identify for the record I'm a council member for the City of South Pasadena, which is also involved in this item.
Yvonne. Somebody calling from Florida.
You probably went to church in the Bahamas.
Yeah, right. Right.
Your boat's ready. There's a guy from Nigeria. He just wants your bank account number.
Right. All right, we're holding 2, 12, 15, 21, and 34. May I get a motion on the balance? Is there anything left?
Move approval,
Not
Mr.
much.
Chair.
Second.
Any opposition to those? Hearing none, those items are approved. Item number 2.
Yeah, on this item, it's a set hearing for proposed amended rule 1113 on architectural coatings. The rule has an exemption in it for chemical that the Office of Environmental Health Hazard Assessment has at least tentatively concluded to be toxic. I'm not comfortable with that. If you guys want to go ahead and set the hearing, you're more than welcome to, but just record me as a no vote. Thank you.
May I then have a motion on the item?
So moved. Second.
Any opposition?
Yes.
Duly noted. Okay, item number 12. Who had 12? Oh, Dr. Williams, right, had 12. Dr. Williams, would you come to the microphone?
Good morning. Dr. Tom Williams, Sierra Club, LA 32 Neighborhood Council, and others. Specifically, for community involvement, this advisor needs to be linked somehow to the community that they're going to be advising upon. The Exide scenario, the carousel scenario, the Elenco scenario often shows up a basic issue as to community involvement of advisors, of staff, of the board itself, and to the issues that are going on at the sites. We now have Porter Ranch to deal with also as to 1148.1, and how does the Southern California Gas Company get involved? So I think there's a opening here that, given the additional funds for this particular advisor, maybe there should be a couple people, 3, that this advisor contacts within the stakeholders of the community that he's going to be investigating. Thank you. All at once? Okay. 21. Rule number 21. The forecast, based upon what we've seen over the last 10 days in the northern San Fernando Valley, there seems to be a problem with 1148.1. Odors being released by a well field. Well, they haven't even figured out really what's going on there. They do know that there's a lot of odor complaints from Porter Ranch area. That is over 10,000 feet away. We don't even know what the source of it is. Well, it's, at one time there was a venting, at one time there was a well blowout, at one time it was coming out of the soil because there was a breach somewhere in the casing. But we don't know where it is. But then, this is a heavy gas that has to flow over 2 miles before it gets to the urban area. And then people find that there's a problem with it. It gets into the news. But one of the questions, is this a clear violation of 1148.1? And do we need to perhaps revise, amend, or go back and review the effectiveness of 1148.1 next year? Because it doesn't seem to be working. 34. Okay. As part of the Sierra Club Transportation Committee, we will be looking at the white papers. As part of another organization, we'll be looking specifically at how goods movement relates to energy and relates to the rest of our economy and our air quality. Because they I-710 had a problem this morning, and I don't know how much of that was contributed by the ports. Oh, the California Freight Management Plan and the white papers from a cursory overview has a basic problem. There's a, might say, a continuum. You have ports problem. You have the near port freight issues. You have the, might say, intermediate and long distance freight issues. But they all usually start with the ports of Long Beach and LA. And we're looking at roughly 80,000 trucks a day going out and coming back on the 710 to the two ports. Get it on rail. Thank you.
Item 15.
Mr. Chairman, before we move on, though, I believe that what we're doing on this Exide advisor is actually at the request of the community, and I'd like some clarification from Barry on that.
Yes, the advisor is at the request of the community, and the community helps select the advisor. This item is to receive money from DTSC to go to the contract. So everything that he was concerned about is in fact actually happening.
Yeah,
there.
that was my understanding. Great. On 15, it's our calendar meeting for next year, and I'd like to move this item with the following amendment and change our September 2nd board meeting, which was scheduled to take place the Friday before the 3-day Labor Day weekend, in which I really kind of plan on being out of town, I hope, to September 9th, the following Friday, which would be consistent with what we're doing with July. So I'll move this item, but with that one change.
Supervisor?
Yes, thank you, Dr. Burke. And I understand, look, we have a board full of busy people, but what I think may get overlooked is some of us only can serve or have served on this board or perhaps volunteered to serve on other boards because we have a set schedule. So if we're going to cancel meetings, great, but the idea of moving a meeting ever is a bad idea because many of us have other obligations. And I can guarantee you Supervisor Antonovich and I, among others, are obligated for every Friday that we're not meeting here, we meet at MetroLink. And, you know, since I became the chairman at MetroLink, you know, about 3 times this year, we moved meetings, and I can't attend them, which I'm sure is probably appreciated by several. But if it wouldn't be too much trouble, Dr. Liu, I completely understand. But maybe the argument is that that's just a meeting we shouldn't have, and the next meeting or the preceding meeting will just be a little longer. And I wouldn't object to that, but moving them just creates other problems unless it's that rare 5th Friday of the month, which, just being on a lot of boards, rarely does anything get scheduled because they don't happen very often.
Excellent point. Why don't we hold 15, take 12, 21, and 34 while you look at your calendar?
No, I just got the answer from that. I was thinking we might be able to move it back. Well, then I would at least think we should discuss whether or not that people will be available to attend on September 2nd prior to a 3-day weekend. This is the same thing that we're doing in July, so that's why I thought it would be consistent with that decision. But I do appreciate the supervisor's concern about not being able to attend the meeting, so we should probably have to figure out something that could accommodate him too. Not meeting is probably, I would imagine, send staffs into conniptions because then we don't get enough of the stuff done.
It's difficult too because we don't have a meeting in August, so if you have 2 months without a meeting, it's very difficult.
Right.
Right.
I think just from the feel of things, I think that we're going to end up holding it on the first Friday.
I can adjust my schedule accordingly.
Okay. Matt, can I have a motion on 15?
Move 15 as it is.
Second.
Okay, now we have 15, 12, 21, and 34. Is there any opposition to any of them? Hearing none, they are approved. Item 35. Yeah, 27. We did 12, 21, 34. Who was the see?
Good morning. My name is Ian McMillan. I'm a Planning and Rules Manager here at South Coast SCAQMD. I'm here to provide an update on a routine report that we do every year on the AB 2588 toxics program. The AB 2588 was passed by the California State Legislature in the late 80s, early 90s. We implement it through Rule 1402. The goals of the act really are fairly simple. We collect toxics emissions data from facilities. We identify those that have potential localized impacts. We determine the potential health risks, and we notify the public if those risks are above certain thresholds, and we also require risk reduction, again, if the emissions are too high. Under Health and Safety Code, under the Health and Safety Code, the District Board is required to hold a public hearing every year on this annual report, which is why we're here today. There's really a standard process that all core facilities go through under AB 2588. Every 4 years, they must report their toxic emissions to us. We prioritize those facilities based on those emissions. We then ask the highest priority facilities to provide a much more detailed toxics inventory report. That then flows into a health risk assessment where we analyze how those emissions could potentially impact the community's health. From there, again, if emissions or if risks are too high from that health risk assessment, then we would move on to public notification and risk reduction activities. For the quadrennial reporting, those emissions are reported through the AER program, and they are viewable on the AQMD Find web tool. I should say that there's been about 1,600 facilities, a little bit more than that have been in this core program and have had to report their emissions every 4 years to us since AB 2588 began. Currently, there are only about 361 facilities in this program. They aren't spread evenly throughout the 4 years. So last year, 69 facilities reported their inventories to us, and 32 had to undergo some auditing to make sure that the emissions and receptor distances that they're reporting are correct. When we look at the health risk assessments, which is one of the key aspects of the AB 2588 program, 335 facilities have conducted an HRA since over the last few decades. 50 of those have had to conduct public notification. Another 24 have implemented risk reduction measures. As you see in the pie chart, about 95% of the facilities with a health risk assessment do not need to do any sort of public notification. Their risks are low enough that they do not need to do notification. I should note, too, that these risks were all calculated with previous versions of the OEHA HRA guidance. That guidance was updated this last year, as we're aware, and so we're implementing that as we move along. Specifically, there are 11 facilities that were the focus of our efforts during the 2014 calendar year. They're shown up here in this table. As we see on the columns moving across, there are check marks for each specific activity for each of these facilities, whether it's the toxics inventory reports, HRAs, what have you. The two columns on the right, in particular, there's considerable staff effort on source testing, and this is looking at the emissions coming out of stacks from facilities, and then air monitoring, which really gets to the fugitive emissions that can be coming from a facility, and this is sort of a newer effort that we're undertaking. As we look at the next upcoming activities for our program, we will continue to implement the new HRA guidance. We plan to revise the public notification and prioritization guidance. We were also looking to develop some guidance on fugitive emissions and monitoring. Again, this is a sort of a newer field, a new focus area, and we want to make sure that there's some standard guidance available for facilities so they know what we will be looking for. We're going to work on revising the industry-wide HRAs for gas stations and dry cleaners. This is to help the smaller businesses with this program. And lastly, there's a voluntary early risk reduction program that some businesses have come to us and asked to have a little bit of relief from some aspects of the program if they would voluntarily reduce their risk ahead of schedule and beyond what's normally required. And that concludes my presentation.
I had a really interesting phenomenon up here. Supervisor Nelson's thing came up to speak, and he wasn't even here. Now, that's a powerful guy.
Yeah. Telepathy.
That's really something.
Telepathy.
Okay, Dr. Liu?
Yes, I read this report and saw that one facility in particular had a health risk estimate that was really off the charts, and it raises some concerns about the impact that might be having on workers and the people who live near them. And I inquired with staff, and they said that actually there had been some progress, but then just last week we had some higher measurements again at this particular facility. We're sending staff out to investigate. That actually then raises concerns with me. You know, what are we doing to protect our staff when they're visiting facilities that have such incredibly high health risk associated with them? Do we have measures in place to protect staff when they go out?
The answer is yes.
Okay, I'm glad to know that, because, I mean, it's just, that one facility is certainly something to be concerned about. Thank you.
All right. Do we need any action on that report?
No, you do not.
Okay. Then we'll move on to item 36.
Good morning, Dr. Burke and members of the board. I'm Jill Wynot, the Assistant Deputy Executive Officer for Planning and Rules, and I will be giving the staff presentation this morning on proposed amendments to our Rule 1156, which regulates the particulate and chrome emissions from cement facilities. This rule has been on the books for about 10 years. It was amended in the year 2009 in response to some very high levels of a potent known human carcinogen, hexchrome or chrome-6, that was found in the areas near the two cement facilities. At that time, the rule established monitoring requirements and a fence line limit that was set to be 100 in a million lifetime cancer risk. At that time, you directed us to come back once we had 5 years of monitoring data to revisit whether we should continue monitoring and at what frequency, and also to address what happens when these facilities close. So before we talk about the rule, I think it's important to highlight some of the history, because many of you were here during 2008 and others were not. And we did our MATES 3 study, and it showed some high levels of chrome. There was an extensive investigation, and it was actually traced back to the piles of clinker, which is material in the cement process, that was traced to Riverside Cement. There was a settlement agreement with that facility. Those piles were removed. There were a lot of things that they did to clean up, and then it ultimately led to the Rule 2009, or the amendments in the year 2009. So there have been reductions in the emissions from the facilities over the last several years, but it's really important to note that these facilities have been in operation for a very long time with higher emissions and deposition into the soil. So next I'd like to show a short video clip that was one of the many media coverages that we had at that time.
Could living near this plant put you at risk for cancer? Angry neighbors speak out. Families demand answers why they're worried about these giant dust piles.
We've been exposed to this for years.
Some people living in the Inland Empire say a cement plant is toxic, spewing high levels of cancer-causing chemicals. Rubidoux residents who live there next to the TXI cement plant say it's making them sick. Tonight they aired their fears and frustrations at a crowded public hearing. Cristina Gonzalez joins us now, live with more. Christina.
Yeah, Carlos, and you know, cement factories are traditionally not major sources of chromium-6, which is what we're talking about. So what they have found here is so significant, it will probably change the way factories are tested all over. With that said, it's little consolation for people who've lived next to TXI for many, many years.
In my household alone on my street, we have 3 cancers.
Concerns at a public hearing with state air quality officials, where the crowd of at least 200 lined up around the block.
People have been complaining for years. My father and mother passed away now. My mother died of cancer.
We need to know what's going on and if it's going to be taken care of.
They're worried now that the SCAQMD confirms that TXI Riverside Cement in Rubidoux is the source of the carcinogen chromium-6.
The levels we've measured immediately adjacent to the plant are as much as 10 times the normal level we find in our urban air. However, it's important to note that the risk associated with that is no greater than living next to a freeway or next to a rail yard.
The source is dust from piles of clinker, the stuff ground into cement. Dust that has been a problem for years, according to residents.
I called no less than 6 times in 2 years.
And nobody seemed to care. I mean, it's just a big business, and we live in that neighborhood, and that's something that we have to deal with.
I've been part of this community like all of you all my life.
That's the TXI plant manager addressing the crowd.
We are committed to working with South Coast Air Quality Management District to better understand the risks. There's not much more I can say tonight, but I know there will be future opportunities.
I'm sure there will be. That's because this is only the beginning. I know that water testing is ongoing. We are still waiting for results, and we saw quite a few attorneys handing out their cards with the crowd. So you know this will be ongoing. We'll keep you updated. Live in Rubidoux, I'm Christina Gonzalez, Fox 11 News.
Okay, so turning to the amendments before you today, we have gone through our typical extensive public process. We were here in September for the public hearing. At that time, there was support from Cal Portland, one of the two facilities subject to the rule, as well as the Sierra Club, but Riverside Cement raised a number of issues. So you sent us back. We went to the September Station Resource Committee, and then we've been working very hard since then to try and resolve that. Not yet. Okay. So the two facilities are shown here. With the yellow dots are their monitors. They surround the perimeter of the facilities. The blue is residential area. The green shows industrial. And these two plants are about 3 miles apart. Cal Portland has been in operation since 1890s, and Riverside Cement since 1906. So there's 3 key elements of the proposal I want to quickly highlight. The first is actually relief for the facilities from some of the monitoring requirements. If they can show 12 months of monitoring below the fence line threshold, they can reduce to 1 monitor and maintain a 1 in 6 day sampling frequency. The second item is very important for public health protection. Facility closure, Cal Portland is regulated by a mining reclamation plan under the County of Riverside, but there is not a parallel process for Riverside Cement. So the rule would ask them to submit a closure plan to the AQMD that would outline the measures they're going to take to responsibly exit from the facility. And then the monitoring requirements, we think it's really important to monitor as they're doing these mass in the soil for decades, for 3 months after they finish their stabilization or cleanup. The last element is lowering the fence line threshold. Because of the recent change to the OEHA guidelines, the current threshold, in order to maintain a 100 in a million cancer risk, needs to be reduced to 0.2 nanogram per cubic meter. Now, we've provided a lot of time for the facilities to get acclimated to this new level. It does not come into effect until September of next year. If they go over after that time, then they need to submit a plan to tell us how they're going to reduce. Or if they're under the AB 2588 process that Ian described in the previous slide, then that would be sufficient. And then we've said that it's not even going to be a notice of violation until after September 2018. So we've provided a lot of time for them to do this. Now, I am pleased to report we were able to resolve a lot of the issues on the long list that you had in September. We did some side-by-side sampling and some analytical work with our lab and their lab to rule out any potential differences, and I believe we resolved those issues satisfactorily. The latest version of the rule has added clarification on specific actions that can be appealed to the hearing board, and that addresses their concern about too much discretion. They also had concerns about uncertainty, about how long it would take us to review. So we've given ourselves some strict guidelines in the rule so that they know how long it will take for us to get back to them. I'm not going to go into the details on this slide, but this just highlights the many changes that we've made, and 11 of these 15 changes have been made to the rule since the September Station Resource Committee meeting. However, Riverside Cement still would like to just basically exit the facility and not have to worry about any air monitoring or any further actions. So they're bringing up comments that we exceed our authority through this rule, and that's clearly not the case. The safety code is very specific under these provisions here. They still keep bringing up lack of transparency, which frankly is baffling because we keep meeting with them. Every time they've asked for information, we've provided it. So we're not sure where that's coming from. We've talked a little bit about the fence line standard. They're concerned that they won't be able to consistently comply, and so we have given them a lot of time to do this, and they have successfully lowered their emissions in the past. When they've seen an uptick, they've been able to go through their processes and their management and make changes. They have a lot of concerns about the closure requirements, and basically, as I stated, we think it's very necessary to make sure that they're monitored through this closure process. We'll work with them on their closure plan. It's a business decision whether they would clean up the property before they sell it or sell it and have a developer responsible for that. And so we don't think it would be a significant deterrent. But yesterday afternoon, we had a meeting in Supervisor Benoit's office in Palm Desert, and we talked a lot about some of the aspects of the plan. So we actually did some brainstorming late yesterday, and can you put this language up, Paul? So we'd like to introduce a change to the language, the yellow highlighted there, that basically says that we will look at these plans and our approval or disapproval will be based on data, studies, good engineering, and scientific judgment. And then we will not unreasonably withhold approval if it complies with the requirements of the subparagraph. So that language, we think, hopefully will go a ways to address that particular issue. Okay, can we go back to the presentation then? Thank you. The last issue that's brought up fairly recently was they thought that their costs estimates would be much higher for the post-closure monitoring. They estimated $200,000 to $300,000 a year for securing power and also having a full-time security guard on their premise. The first bullet there is what our lab has experienced when we need to run a temporary power pole, and it's much lower than their estimates, about $10,000 per year for the pole rental and the electricity, and about $3,500 for installation. Now, we have been for 5 years providing Cal Portland with monitoring and picking up filters, changing the filters, and doing the lab analysis, and that runs about $16,000 a year for each monitor, and we've offered that to Riverside Cement, so that could lower their cost as well. We don't use security guards for our monitoring sites, and even if you needed security, there's some less expensive options than a full-time person on site. And we wanted to point out that Riverside Cement, they're part of Martin Marietta, which is a Fortune 500 company with billions of dollars of sales. And this particular facility has made a profit of over $11 million by selling their reclaim credits that the district issued as part of that program at no cost. So we think that, yes, it will be a little inconvenient, yes, it will be a little expensive, but we think it's necessary. Riverside Cement has had several criticisms of the OEHA methodology. This is something that is standard practice that we rely on these experts. Their process includes a very extensive public and peer-reviewed process, and they have used more recent studies than what EPA did when they set a factor that was a little bit lower than that. I'm not going to go over all of this in detail, but I wanted to highlight on the multi-pathway exposure. When you have certain chemicals like chrome, it's not just if you breathe it, but you can also have it absorbed through your skin or by ingestion. And this is something that provides a more complete exposure assessment when you look at all the potential routes. And that's been very standard in our risk assessments for many years. They've contended that there are other agencies that will oversee their demolition and cleanup, and that's true. However, they don't necessarily have the air quality focus or expertise, or have the resources or interest to do a full CEQA document or follow that process. So we don't think there would be sufficient safeguards. And I'll go ahead and continue on these. One of the things that they've consistently told us is you don't know if there's chromium-6 in the soil. Chromium-6 can change to other forms of chromium. So we went out last Friday and took a few samples, or several samples, at their property. We saw some readings that were similar to the levels that we saw in their soil dust in 2008. We didn't see as high of readings, but there's still readings that are 100 times higher than the background levels of soil in that area. So this is soil that's accumulated on their property. If they start digging, grading, knocking down equipment, then we're very concerned that that chrome dust will become airborne and travel into the neighboring community. Just two photos here to show some of these higher readings. This soil on this conveyor belt underneath here had 1,800 parts per billion chrome. And this was a similar system where they moved materials between some of their storage bays, and that had almost 1,900 parts per billion chrome. So the impact assessment for CEQA, we did not identify any significant impacts, and we did not have any comments on that CEQA document. The socio-analysis has a combination of some cost savings for reduced monitoring, and also there's a small provision change for Riverside Cement for duplicate source testing. The electricity and monitoring sample costs we've already discussed, And we even included some high potential worst-case cost in case in case Riverside Cement needed to make modifications inside of a building or to use chemical stabilizers on 50 acres of their property. So in summary, this rule provides an off-ramp for monitoring, which the current rule does not have. We have updated the fence line limit. It's still 100 in a million fence line level, which is quite high. And we have provided 3 years before going over this standard would be a notice of violation. And as I've said repeatedly, we strongly feel that monitoring is needed to make sure that we protect the public's health. So the recommended action, we ask that you certify the environmental assessment and approve and adopt the amendments to Rule 1156 with the additional language that I showed earlier. Thank you.
Thank you for the presentation. We have a number of speakers. We'd like Dr. Stewart to come to the microphone, as well as Dave Pettit to the other microphone. Dr. Stewart, would you state your name for the record?
Jim Stewart. Excuse me, speaking on behalf of the Sierra Club, we are very concerned about the huge health dangers posed to the community by Riverside Cement. And we're actually really scared that this proposed amendments are going to delay the imposition of the new OEHA guidelines of 20 parts per billion, that to maintain this at 100 parts per billion for another 3 years, I think really endangers the community health. And I'd also actually like the staff to respond to this strange rule about no notices of violation before 3 years from now. How can we protect the public if they're exceeding this limit?
We allowed the 3 year, I'm sorry, do you want a staff response now? Okay. We put in the provision for 3 years. We want them to do their best to try and get below that. That was in response to Riverside Cement saying that if they were increasing their production, they thought that it would be very difficult for them to comply. So we don't like to adopt a rule and have people automatically be in compliance right away. We thought it was appropriate to give some time to phase in so that they could make any changes if they needed to. So that's why we put that provision in.
So it appears then that Riverside Cement can exceed this 100 parts per billion and they won't get a violation? Did I understand you correct, Joe? Okay, we can't have that discussion, but anyway, you guys understand our concerns that that this is going way overboard now with these amendments to give Riverside Cement a carte blanche to exceed the limits and to endanger the public health. And we really want the board to stand up strong for the public health because this is a very, very serious issue. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Mr. Pettit? While you're speaking, I'd like Dr. John Boudra to come to the other microphone.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I used to be a doctor of basketball, but I can't play anymore, so it's just Mr. Pettit now. NRDC supports the staff proposal. I think that Ms.
Could we have your name for the record, please?
David Pettit, NRDC.
Thank you.
Ms. Wynot's remarks, I think, illustrate how staff has really bent over backwards to accommodate Riverside here, including the 3-year free pass that we just heard discussion about. NRDC is, and I am, very involved in the Exide matter, which also involved decades of very harmful substances being put into the community through aerial deposition. We're looking at the potential here of the same thing with Riverside Cement. The board has a chance now to try to eliminate or reduce the possibility of having another Exide situation out in Rubidoux, and I hope that the board takes that opportunity and supports the staff proposal. Thank you.
Thank you. And while the doctor is speaking, would Kent Minot come to the vacant microphone? Your name for the record, sir.
Good morning. John Boudreau with the California Office of Environmental Health Hazard Assessment. I have a few comments in support of the rule. First off, hexavalent chromium is internationally considered to be a known human carcinogen. Hexavalent chromium is also known to be genotoxic, causes DNA damage, gene mutations, and chromosomal damage. The AWEA hexavalent chromium inhalation cancer unit risk and oral cancer potency values and the risk assessment methodology used have received both public comment and public review and external peer review by the Scientific Review Panel on Toxic Air Contaminants. And I might note that the oral cancer potency values have also received external peer review through the Public Health Goal Drinking Water Program. And hexavalent chromium is physically associated with clinker dust. It's not chemically associated. So you would generally assume that bioavailability unless you have data to the contrary. And I'm not aware that there's any specific data that's been submitted for this particular set of clinker dust. The AWEA estimates for plant uptake of hexavalent chromium are actually newer than the US EPA estimates. They've been done more recently and they use newer data than US EPA considered. And then finally, the multi-pathway analysis that was done for hexavalent chromium in this situation does not just consider deposition and uptake by homegrown crops. It also includes dermal exposure. Kids play in the dirt and they absorb hexavalent chromium that way, and also exposure through mother's milk.
Yeah, Would Mr. Michael Meehan come to the?
Great. Yeah, I'm Kent Minot, Sierra Club staff. Just briefly, I support totally the amendments, and I just want to comment briefly on. In the presentation, we heard about 5 years of monitoring before action was taken, and now, as Dr. Stewart pointed out, there's 3 years in which the RTC will not get a violation, even if they violate air quality regulations. Yeah, the amendments are good. They tighten the screws on a polluter. But I just want to point out that the job of an air quality management district cannot be to bend over backwards to accommodate a polluter. It must be to defend the public that's suffering the effects of that pollution. So please continue to tighten the screws as fast as you can. As the previous testimony pointed out, this is a really serious pollution. Action waited until there were 5 cancers on one block. That's, well, it's a serious issue, and thank you for your good work. Please continue.
Thank you for your testimony. Would David Perkins come to the other vacant microphone, please?
You got it? Okay, I'm Michael Minen, Riverside Cement Company. We feel this rule is not necessary. There is no soil or air problem when you start looking at the data. We provided many comments, technical, scientific, over the time, and we still have many concerns, everything from lab data to other toxicology issues. If you can bring up the slide there. There is a tremendous amount of data, site-specific on Chrome 6 on this. We have always said that it's from handling clinker and cement. As you can see, there is cement production and clinker production all well under the limits. We took a lot of steps to lower the limits. back in 2013, and it's successful. In this time, we've handled like 1 million tons of cement and clinker. During the earlier time, where there's no Chrome 6 emissions, that is what it would be like once we close. There's Santa Ana winds, those things. Cal Portland is doing a lot of reclamation remedial activities right now, and they've had no hits. When you have clinker and cement, you get this, you get concrete, and that's what happens when it rains and you add water. Chrome 6 in soils does not pose a material exposure risk, even in ingestion foods grown. EPA has proven this and has determined this. South Coast recently did those studies, and the OHIA residential screening standards for all exposure pathways is 37,000 ppb for commercial and 17,000 ppb for residential. We're only at 10% of the screening levels for the property on even those clinker and cement samples they even did last week. The soils are materially below those multi-pathway exposure limits. This rule is vague on the rule and the closure and what's going to happen afterwards. I have no idea. We've been told with all our questions on what the definitions of contamination, stabilization, what's going to go, we've been told after this passes, we'll sit down and negotiate. We have a lot of concerns with that. We've had very limited discussions or one-on-one sit-downs since the last board meeting. What's the definition of permanent stabilization? What's the definition of contaminated? Those costs that were brought up, for 5 years, been doing the budget. I know what the costs are. There's costs of the rental of the machines. We don't own these machines. Security is a legitimate point. Those costs were too low. We don't want to use the South Coast Independent Lab. We want to use a third-party independent lab. And those results we had earlier were 23% higher. These numbers we've been showing here are higher than the South Coast. We feel we're well under any health risk assessment, and the data and the activities already shown will be below any standards or even background potentially. We feel this rule is unneeded. Thank you.
Thank you. And while Mr. Perkins is speaking, would Mr. Ballantyne come to the vacant microphone?
Yes, Mr. Chair, David Perkins, also with Riverside Cement, and I thank you for taking the opportunity to hear our comments today. Realize I don't have a lot of time, so I'm going to hit it pretty quickly. I did want to point out regarding the compliance in the new regulation, the new language, it does actually call for notices of violation if the standard is exceeded. Where it talks about it is basically, if you exceed the standard, you're supposed to submit a compliance plan, even between this 2016 to 2018 period. If you do not get an approved compliance plan that identifies things that you're doing to mitigate that exceedance, it is a notice of violation. So there's no free pass. There are measures in place, and this is on page 15 of the proposed regulation, but there are measures in place to ensure that that standard is not exceeded. I'm going to use the last remaining amount of my time to talk about the key issues of redevelopment. And really, ultimately, our concerns about this regulation, that it's excessive, it's a brownfield regulation, and it requires permanent work, basically usurps the oversight of local agencies in the redevelopment of the property. Originally, this rule was designed to manage particulates from an operating facility, and now it's morphed into a brownfield redevelopment and regulatory program. The agency is an air agency, and our concern essentially is that it simply creates additional uncertainty, and it does little, if anything, to improve risk at the site that, when closed, based on the graphs we saw, is not going to pose any risk. We have genuine concerns that this will just impede, if not altogether stop, the redevelopment of the property. That's our primary concern in an area where ultimately there is some real need for redevelopment. And I'll talk about that next. The community, the city. It was referred to, Jurupa Valley is where this facility is located. That's a small city that's struggling right now to just be economically viable. Obviously, they have an interest in the ability to redevelop this property. To our knowledge, there have not been any discussions with staff and them regarding this proposed rule. We met with them yesterday, and they were flabbergasted and surprised that they hadn't even been reached out by staff to talk about what could potentially be done. Based on our discussions, they actually would be very willing to try to identify certain measures that they would enforce. I mean, they're a small city. Certainly an agency like the South Coast would have the ability to help direct and manage that process. But unfortunately, that opportunity has not yet been able to be taken during this process. And I would think with constituents and an area that you have responsibility for, you would want to be able to have that opportunity. Unfortunately, we're just left with language, again, that is vague and it's subject to the discretionary approval of the executive officer. Just one quick example, we were required to submit an HRA back in 2008, and here we are in 2016, we actually submitted 2. We still have yet to receive approval of that. And so we're concerned that if this language passes as it is today, appreciate the modifications and the changes that were made, but if it passes today, we may be up here discussing those definitions in the year 2020 or 2022. So I thank you for the opportunity. I appreciate the chance to share our comments. Thank you.
Excuse me, just one question. How many acres is your facility on?
Sorry, it's 368 acres.
Ooh, okay.
Yes, sir.
Time, come to the vacant microphone, please.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and board members. My name is Howard Ballantyne. I'm a consultant with AECOM and a consultant to Riverside Cement. My technical comments are based upon one sentence. The AQMD's proposed fence line standard is based on out-of-date science. Chrome 6 in cement dust is not the same thing as Chrome 6 from plating shops and chromate, which is what the standard is based upon. Chromate is a small, highly mobile aerosol particle that can get deep into the lungs, whereas cement dust is held, the hexchrome is held in a highly tightly bound matrix that is not bioaccessible. Because of this, OSHA does not regulate cement dust from cement plants as an air toxic, but as a normal fugitive dust issue. In 1993, EPA allowed the use of cement kiln dust as a soil stabilizer for agricultural fields. The supporting risk assessment performed by EPA determined there was no unacceptable risk from the use of cement dust as a soil amendment. AQMD calculated that approximately 2/3 of the risk of Chrome 6 is through the multi-pathway consumption. As we just heard, there are multiple multi-pathway exposure routes, but 62 or 63% of the total risk is from the plant pathway and 35% is from inhalation. The rest is trivial. So it is indeed the multi-pathway is the ingestion of plant-grown on the property. Why is AQMD so far from EPA and OSHA's position? The word is bioavailability. The best example is mercury in fillings. Mercury is a highly toxic compound, everybody agrees on that, and yet it is used in fillings because it's bound in a matrix, an amalgam, that is not bioavailable. The same thing applies to cement. It's tightly bound in a very dense matrix, and it is not bioavailable, or very little bioavailability. So we're not contesting the cancer risk, but it's just the bioavailability of how it can get into the body. So my comments are based on publicly available documents. There's nothing new here other than newer science. In summary, AQMD is applying out-of-date science to a fugitive dust problem. AQMD should follow the lead of EPA and OSHA and regulate cement dust according to the risk posed by the dust and not computed with erroneous and out-of-date assumptions. Thank you.
Judith Pratt, please come to the vacant microphone.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. Judith Prytis, counsel for Riverside Cement. Just want to summarize the company's comments overall. The company has never objected to a rule that is health protective based on sound science. What we have been lacking here throughout this process, and the company has been working actually for years, they've been working with staff to develop standards regarding exposure to hexavalent chromium, both airborne and potentially in soils. And what we've seen is a pattern with the AQMD using either out-of-date science or slipshod or sloppy science. I want to refer to the testing that was referenced on last week. AQMD inspectors went out and they collected 13 samples in 64 minutes, 4.9 minutes between samples on a 368-acre property. There's no sampling protocol. They actually didn't take soil samples. They took samples of material. You saw the photos. That was not soil, that was cement material. Yet they ran a test, which is, as best as we can tell, not an EPA-validated method, no backup, very little chain of custody, and we have no idea what the reference levels were, whether there were blanks, whether there were any kind of controls. And what were the results that we got? We can put that. As they were touting up to 1870 parts per billion in material, not soil, again, in cement material. This is a table here showing that the residential soil screening standard from OEHA for purposes of determining soil cleanups is 17,000. And you can see the industrial one that I've highlighted is 37,000. So we do have other concerns with the illegality, because we do think this is an unlawful brownfields rule that requires conduct that's beyond the expertise of the agency. We have the concerns that every time we have a scientific issue arise, we've got sloppy or incomplete or hidden science. And we do have, we do appreciate that AQMD has tried to put some time limits in, but when the standards as to what is contaminant, I mean, if you look at the soil screening standards here, there's no contamination out there. It's not even close. Yet the AQMD clearly believes there's cleanup required here. So the summary is that the company's in favor of sound science. We haven't seen it. There's a pattern of not having the sound science, and we do oppose adoption of the rule in its current form because it's too vague. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. That concludes our testimony on this item. Are there any further comments by staff?
I guess I'd like to just clarify what we're really doing here. As you've heard and you've seen in the photographs and the video, we have a large industrial site, been there for decades, processing material that we know contains hexavalent chrome. We have monitoring data from 8 years ago where we had significant impacts in the community. And the concern here is, as they wind this thing down, remove equipment, potentially grade the site, that we're going to kick up dust that's on the property that's going to lead to hexavalent chrome levels leaving the property that pose a significant risk to the adjacent public. This rule simply requires them to monitor and to have a dust control plan and to implement that plan if the monitoring data shows an exceedance of the threshold that is specified in the rule. It's really not much different than what we do for any construction site, looking at whether or not the dust is leaving the construction site due to the construction that might pose a airborne risk to the surrounding public. But in this case, we're dealing with a highly toxic material, as you heard from the OEHA representative here today. And this rule, as Jill indicated in her presentation, also allows them, upon adequate demonstration, to actually decrease the amount of monitoring compared to what is being done today. And as Jill also noted, it allows the company to appeal to the hearing board if they disagree with the staff's position on the plan that identifies the dust control measures or the need to implement those measures. So we think that this is, a balanced measure to ensure the surrounding community that was already heavily impacted, because there are homes directly across the street and there are businesses directly beyond the fence line of the facility in one direction. This is just more common sense. We don't want a lot of hexavalent chrome dust that poses a risk over 100 in a million going to the other folks across the property line without the company implementing dust control measures.
Yeah, I just have a question for staff. I mean, one of the issues that was raised by the commenters was that we have undefined terms and they're ambiguous issues. I mean, obviously, you can't write a rule and define every word that you put into that rule. You'd have a dictionary for every rule that you do. So I guess my question to staff is, you know, how much level of comfort do you have that the terms are properly defined, and are the terms that we use in this regulation that they've questioned any less defined than other rules that we've adopted and have relied upon and have been challenged and held up?
No, this is consistent with our other regulations, Dr. Liu. That their comments center around what we're going to do in the dust control plan. And what triggers the dust control plan implementation is the monitored level at the fence line of hexavalent chrome. In the rule language, we refer to one of our dust control rules and say they should evaluate the measures that are listed in that rule for dust control, but we don't restrict them to that. We allow them to select other measures, and should they have an exceedance, they would have an ability to tell us which measures would be appropriate based on their understanding of what caused the exceedance.
And
so
I see that we put in the hearing board appeal explicitly into the rule language, but is there anything that prevents them, say that they feel like they're getting jerked around by staff, to coming to the board during a public comment portion or a
they could
stationary source
absolutely
committee
come
meeting
to the board or to the stationary source committee
to express concerns if they
to
have any problems?
express concerns.
All right, thank you.
That concludes your comments. Mayor Yates.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Being the chairman of the stationary source, I've been dealing with this issue between Riverside and Cal Portland cement companies, and I've been out to the facility at Cal Portland and worked with those gentlemen on revised rules for several years now, and they've been quite cooperative. This particular rule seems to be aimed specifically at Riverside Cement, but it actually will affect Portland's closing also, correct?
Actually, Mayor Yates, the rule is directed at both facilities. Portland Cement has reached a point of agreement with the rule language.
Yeah, but Portland still, I've met with them. I guess what I'm trying to bring to the rest of the board members is these both parties want to close down. Both parties were there long before the typical encroachment of businesses and houses moving in on them. Obviously forcing them to close, which is a good thing because of the problems we've had with the air quality. But like Riverside Cement with 360 acres that they would like to sell, with the way the rule's written, I don't know why anybody in the world would want to buy either plot of land, whether it's Cal Portland or Riverside Cement. Why would somebody want to buy that property to develop it with the SCAQMD doing this over both particles of land? And I had expressed this opinion during the stationary source meetings. I know there's other agencies that are going to be there to monitor the shutdown of those facilities. I can't remember what agencies they are. Do you know what they are? Who will be out there?
Well, there's a number of agencies that could take a look at this, the local government authorities, and then certainly depending upon if they conduct a full survey and what is found, could involve US EPA or DTSC.
Yeah, okay. So now the SCAQMD is standing over them, watching, and then I don't know how long it's going to take them to close these two facilities down, but they have a major and huge investment in the owning of that property. How many acres is Cal Portland? Does anybody know? Anybody here from Cal Portland?
It's over 500 acres.
Over 500?
Yes.
But Mayor Yates, we're simply requiring a monitor at the fence line to look at the air quality levels. We're not telling them how to clean the site or what to clean.
I understand that. The other question I have is this organization has a lot of things to do. I mean, we do. And even with this revised deal about the CEO, I'm a little uncomfortable giving the executive officer, not because of you, because of your position, the authority to call shots over these two businesses when I think the responsibility would lie with the governing board. This is a pretty big issue, involves a lot of money, and I don't know whether we should be imparting ourselves into this issue as much as we are. I would definitely like this changed, that you've already changed from the executive officer to the governing board. For the executive officer to have the power to call these shots is a little egregious to me. And as far as the dust control, any construction or demolition site, to control the dust, I don't care whether it's chromium or what it is, they obviously have to keep the area wet down to keep from any kind of VOC or PM 2.5 or whatever from blowing into the neighboring homes and or businesses. And so, but that seems to be everybody seems to be bringing that up. But there are ways of controlling that dust from fleeing the site. And I had expressed my opinion during we've had 3 meetings this year on this project, and we seem to not be able to come to a partnership, obviously with Riverside Cement, but Cal Portland continues to contact with me. They're very uneasy about the closing procedures. They also think they'll never ever be able to sell that land with the AQMD hovering over them. So I'm still uncomfortable with the way that we have not partnered with Riverside Cement, and Cal Portland, you say, may have come to agreement, but they're still very upset about how they're supposed to dispose of this very valuable commercially rated asset. And so I plan on voting no on this issue until such time as we can partner with Riverside Cement and deal with that issue of the huge investment. It's over 800 and some acres of commercial property, which is a lot of money, until we can come to some agreement with Cal Portland and Riverside Cement. I will vote no and request that this amendment be changed to the governing board and the authority taken away from the chief executive officer. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Councilmember Mitchell?
Yes, thank you. Some issues were raised by the testimony that I would like to ask our staff about. One of the issues was that our requirements are more strict than US EPA. I'd like to hear staff response on that.
The company is referring to the cleanup thresholds that EPA and DTSC uses for the soil. What we are basing for the trigger to implement dust control measures, not to clean up all the soil, dig it up and haul it away or somehow treat it, is the fence line monitoring threshold that's specified in the requirements. We think that when they have to go to redevelop the property, that they will have to do some sort of surveying for toxics in the soil. What we were trying to show with the very simple sampling that we went out and did last week was, we may have found nothing, we didn't know what we would find, but we found some samples that had concentrations that matched samples from 8 years ago that led to problems in the community. And so it shows that the material is still there on site. We don't know how extensive until they go out and survey the site, But the whole point is we're simply monitoring at the fence line and using that as a trigger. And the rule does, the language that's before you, contain a provision that says that if they conduct sampling of the site by, the protocols that would be used for soil contamination that would trigger the soil cleanup, and they find areas that are uncontaminated, that those areas would be excluded from the dust control requirements.
So with the soil cleanup, would that be under the jurisdiction of DTSC?
It could be, depending upon the concentrations, or US EPA, depending upon the concentrations.
So I think that's important to note that we're responsible for air, and what we're going to do is air monitoring. And other agencies would be responsible for soil cleanup if they decide to grade the site or to redevelop the site. Other agencies will come in and be looking at that.
That's correct.
Is that correct?
That's correct.
And then the other point was the point that there cannot be an NOV until 2018. But I understand the rule will call for some kind of compliance plan if they don't meet the air monitoring requirement. Could you go over that, please?
Sure. The provisions that are before you, as Jill mentioned, make an adjustment to the threshold, the trigger, that occurs due to the monitoring. And so since the trigger level is dropping because of the revisions to the OEHA methodology, the staff was proposing to give a window of time where if they exceed the new trigger point, that they wouldn't receive a violation notice, but they would be required to implement the dust control measures to bring the ambient levels down below the trigger.
Okay. Well, it seems to me that our staff has done quite a lot to build some flexibility into the rule, and also to work with both of the entities to achieve what I think would be required for public health. I think it's important that we not mix up what is required for soil contamination and cleanup as opposed to what we do for monitoring air quality. I'm prepared to support the rule as it is now stated with the amended language. And I understand, even with the amended language, that the applicant would have the opportunity to appeal any item to the hearing board. And so there's multiple levels of redress if there is a grievance by the applicant. And redevelopment, yes. I understand that entities want to redevelop, but you have to think about when you redevelop it, what do you redevelop to, and what is the impact on subsequent owners or operators of the land. And I think that's an important thing to keep in our minds, that you do need to be cognizant that future owners will be inheriting whatever is here, and that the present owners do have some obligation not to pass on a problem to the next generation. Also, I think it's noteworthy that the Riverside was able to sell their reclaim credits for $11 million. They do have a pot of money there that is available for their use in redevelopment as well as in this monitoring requirement. So I think our staff has been pretty fair in working with them and developing a rule that gives them some flexibility. So I'm prepared to support it. Thank you.
Dr. Parker? I want to ask staff, and this is one of the problems when you have experience in some of the areas, that to make sure that I'm reading this exactly correctly. We are talking about if, in fact, as an example, we could put a tent over these 360 acres of land and contain everything therein. This company or the other company would not have to do anything totally at all, because all the stuff would be confined within those 368 acres, regardless to what toxicity or what the effects itself would be. Is that correct?
Yes, but we're not asking them to tent the entire property.
I understand that. But my point is that we're saying to everyone is that what happens on the inside can stay on the inside. It's only we're concerned about if it gets airborne and comes outside of those fence line areas.
And if what comes outside is equivalent to 100 in a million risk.
That was going to be my next point. And then that which comes outside would exceed those limits itself of airborne contaminations for those pollutants. If that's the only thing that we're concerned about, and that's all that they would have to really do, then my question itself is, we are now judging from our lab results other companies by the same lab results. One of the speakers said that we're using, very phony science, et cetera, but that's what we're judging everyone else with.
We have an EPA certified lab. We use EPA and ARB approved methodologies for testing. We have one of the best chem labs in the country.
So the point being is that if that's what it is, and that's what we have, I agree with Mayor Yates that probably due process would mean if they disagree with anything that the executive director would have. I don't know if we want to set a precedent by saying that everything that someone disagrees with, that we're then going to be the scientists here at the board rather than having staff to make an analysis, a decision first, and then maybe an appeal itself coming up to the board after that. But to say that all of these matters themselves immediately come directly to the board, I don't think that would be, at least I don't think it would be a good idea, because now we're going to be sitting here judging science at all of our meetings and all of our hearings that everybody's going to deal with, rather than having staff to do it, and then if there are issues that are still remaining, then it comes here. I have a very big concern to the extent itself that as a person that is presently dealing with a project right now that of several acres of land, that we had to have mitigation dust control measures, and that was land that did not have any kind of chromium or other pollutants, just dust going into people's backyards, into their pools, into their homes, that we have to do something about it. In order to have those mitigation kind of procedures in place, that's one of the costs itself of doing development. That's not something that is unique directly to the cement factory business, but I think it's something that is unique to development. And everyone who's a developer understands that, or should understand it. I think the concerns itself of vague and ambiguous terms is a reasonable one. But likewise, I'm not the one to evaluate that to the extent itself of if that's what we're dealing with, and if therefore those terms are there for others, we're going to go through and change every rule now in order to make those terms itself more clear for just this particular situation. And if someone can say that you don't use those or that is there, I would strongly state that staff look at those and try to put some definitiveness. Everybody should know what it is that they're going to have to expect when they're doing development. It shouldn't be vague. It should be as very clear. One of my colleagues stated that tell them what it is, regardless to how high the standard itself is. You meet those standards, that's what we're going to hold you to, and we're not going to hold you to anything different. People want to know that when they're doing business, not that, all of a sudden something is going to be presented and it's going to be projected for one and accepted for another. Should be standard and should be a standard procedure. But beyond that, I have a concern that we have Exide as a proceeding, and this is following that. We're going to be left with a situation later on that we're going to find that the science then proves that some of this chromium that is going to get out, chromium-6 that got out is going to be really, really very dangerous to the surrounding communities or whatever it may be. Maybe that's the reason why they're closing, because the communities are encroaching itself on their industrialization. But that's a problem itself, I guess, of living in Southern California with the expansion itself of the population. So I have some concerns, but I think those concerns are, if it's the standard for everyone else, then that we should probably stick with those standards and not start changing them, because then we're going to be opening up a floodgates and everybody's going to be saying that we're biased in this regard and more lenient in another. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Supervisor Benoit.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a troubling rule for me on a couple of levels. I came to this board 4 years plus or minus ago with concerns about the omnipresence of government and what it does to our business climate in California, et cetera, and I still hold those concerns. And this agency gets painted with that a lot, and in some cases maybe with some justification, other cases maybe not. But this one looks to me like, again, another little bit of mission creep where we haven't done this historically. If we go back 10 or 15 years ago, I don't think we would have found ourselves on the fence lines of many closing businesses sniffing. We are now. And I think part of the reason that we're having this discussion today is Exide, and there certainly was a problem there, and it's expanded into a huge number of homes in the area, and maybe it's learning from that we have to be more on guard as a government, as a citizenry. But it's still mission creep. It's still growth of a government oversight, and I'm always very, very concerned about that. Continue to have that concern. Some of the friends of mine who have called me and pointed that out also suggested that we have local control that would do this. We don't need to do it. To some degree, as a representative of local government, I understand that and appreciate that and think that we do our job fairly well most of the time. But I'm not sure that we're really good at the air monitoring that we're talking about here. And I think the concern I see in a nearby city that has recently approved 40 million square foot of warehouses, Moreno Valley would be the name. Thank you. I was going to avoid that, but thanks for bringing that out. Has left me with a little bit of concern about whether or not that process is as thorough or safe as it might have appeared at some point. And Arupa's some good people there, but it's a small city and it's having its own troubles. And how deep and how far could they go? And if we just walked away and left it in the hands of them, it'd still probably come back to be an AQMD issue. So I have some serious mixed feelings about this. I did want to make one point that occurred to me as I was reading this regulation, and it probably registered from previous regulations, and we've had a discussion about whether or not the board should be the final arbitrator of this. I really questioned where we so frequently refer to the executive officer in these types of rules as the final arbitrator, the guy that makes the decisions on rules like this, and if we shouldn't have an enforcement officer at a level below, so that instead of writing in here that the executive officer makes all these determinations over and over and over again, we would have somebody below that level who would actually be in charge of enforcement of issues related to regulations, thereby creating an immediate appeal level to the executive officer when appropriate, instead of having everything go directly to the executive officer. But that's a big, long-term, I know, major discussion. But I think that if you look at most other forms of government, it's not always immediately appealed to the president, or the chief executive of the government. It is appealed to an appropriate level, and then there is within the structure an appeal level before you go to the appeal board, et cetera. None of the discussion, not going to, and I appreciate the change, the effort to try and do this. I did entertain a lengthy discussion with Riverside Cement. I've looked at this probably as deeply as any rule we've had before us. On balance, I understand the safety needs. I recognize that community. Let me ask you, is that the film clip we saw, is that one of these two and with a new name? Or is that a different, yeah. River, but it had a different,
Yes, Riverside Cement was formerly TXI, Riverside Cement.
I
so
thought
it's the
something had
same
changed because
facility.
Barry had a lot more hair in that film. All right, sorry.
Ouch, Ben.
Yeah, really. So with that, I'll just conclude to say that I have had concerns. I've weighed these concerns very heavily. It's a tough call, and I'm going to side with the agency. But I wanted to express for the record that we got to be careful. One other question I wanted to ask: we've now got into the business of regulating the close down of a plant that was Exide was iron. No, I'm sorry, metals, lead. Now now we're in the process of getting ready to do cement. What else are we going to go into? We got any other ideas?
Well, last month you approved monitoring for folks that were handling metals like the battery manufacturers and TAMCO. We had this one, Exide, and there might be one or two others that I could potentially think of.
We do have metal grinding on the rule calendar.
We do, but it depends on what the results show. But whether it would be closure is a different story. We just had a handful of sites that came up that had high metal levels that were getting into the air, and where we're finding soil contamination for some other sites adjacent to the facilities that's causing a lot of public concern and problems, and then expense as to who pays for it to clean it up.
And chromium now here. Any other materials?
The other main source of chromium are like chrome platers that are very heavily regulated. We do have one facility that we are working with to get their emissions under control. But I don't know that we're going to have closure requirements for a facility like that.
I think we should be very, very circumspect and do this where we have to for the public good, but not do it willy-nilly.
I agree. I agree with you, Supervisor.
I have no further board members who, Dr. Parker?
Can you correct, clarify? I think Jill said that they had made $11 million in selling credits that we gave to them.
Yes, this is something you'll hear about more next month, I suspect. But when we started the Reclaim program, we provided allocations to the participating companies. And so if the company closes up, then they can sell the credits that we provided them at no cost. And I wanted to bring this up with the board next month because I think it's a perverse outcome. You're incentivizing companies to close up by the amount of money that they can get from selling the credits. In the case of Cal Portland, I think it's a little less than $100 million in RTCs that they were able to sell.
This is all the ones that we gave them, not ones that they accumulated.
That's right. The staff did a net calculation for the purposes of today's meeting relative to Riverside Cement.
Is there someone else? Judy?
Excuse me. I would like to move the staff recommendation to certify the final environmental assessment for amended Rule 1156 and for the amending of Rule 1156.
Does that include this amendment?
Yeah.
Including the amendment, yes.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. On this, can we open the roll? Passes 9-2. Okay, on item 37.
Mr. Chairman, we're requesting that this item be held over till the December 4th board meeting. Would appreciate a motion by the board to do so.
Second.
Any opposition? Now, what do we do about all these people that showed up to testify?
I walked over earlier to explain to them that their testimony today would really, if they were to testify, be about delaying the hearing, but we didn't put the package out, so you couldn't hold the completed hearing anyway, and that it would be best for them to come back next month. I also am about to offer, since they've come all the way out here, that I've arranged for a room and the staff can update them on where we are with the amendments
Oh,
and
that's
the
very good.
proposal.
That's
So
very
that
nice.
it wouldn't be a waste of their time having come out here. But they may want to.
Yates is saying you should give them lunch.
Yeah, we're not.
Hey, I work for the board.
Okay. And we'll see you next month. Since we have a motion second with, do we have any opposition? Hearing none, the motion to continue is approved. We now have 38B, a request to the city of Diamond Bar to provide alternative fuel signage on city streets.
I'll move the item, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
Any opposition to that item? Hearing none, it is approved. Now we have.
Mr. Chairman, I think we have one speaker on that previous item.
They're asking if they could just have one speaker speak for a moment on the.
Oh, anytime.
reclaim.
Thank you so
Anytime.
much. I really
I saw you
appreciate it.
taking pictures.
I was.
Yeah.
I love the screen. It's so great.
You weren't
so-
doing too well either. I want you to know.
Thank you. My name is Graciela, and I'm with the Sierra Club in Los Angeles. And thank you so much for acknowledging, because it does take quite a bit of effort to get out here. And we also are really fortunate and glad that we can say we actually have folks from every one of the counties, every one of the 4 counties here. And I specifically wanted to acknowledge people from the East Coachella Valley are driving 130 miles to come out to these hearings. But I want to thank you all, and especially his staff, for all of your work to protect our air over all this time, and really grateful for the staff diligence and also for their responsiveness to the public. But we're here, obviously, because initially you guys were going to vote today on the NOx rule, and we support the NOx rule, and we wanted to come and show our support. So we will be back in December, no doubt, and with lots more people. But we just wanted to say that we're just here to help you all as board members, give you basically the cover that you need to make the right decision. Because we know, and we're worried, obviously, that if the vote keeps getting delayed, that must mean that the oil and gas industry are having some influence, and we hope they're not having too much influence. And we just want to make sure that you hear from all of the constituents and groups that are really concerned not only about our health, but about our planet, and the incredible opportunity that you all have to make a decision that's actually going to make a direct difference in our air and having to do with climate change during the talks that are happening in Paris. And so we are going to use all of the energy, because there's a bunch of little forums and rallies and all sorts of activity for people who care about what's happening in Paris. We're going to go there and tell them, hey guys, there's also this local decision-making body that's going to be deciding on pollution during these talks. And hopefully they will all take our encouragement and make sure that they communicate their support for your vote on this rule. So that's all I really wanted to say, and I want to thank you so much for your time. And I know you all have other jobs in addition to this job, so I'm sure that you all are, doing your best and pressed for time as well. So thank you very much. Excuse me?
Looking for a job, so if you hear about one, let me know. Thank you very much for coming, and we'll see you next month.
See you. Thank you.
Okay, Dr. Williams, while you're up, since you're on public comment, and Ray Goldsworthy, where's Mr. Goldsworthy? Come on down into the other microphone.
I'm staying. Dr. Tom Williams, Sierra Club, LA 32 Neighborhood Council, also helping with the Save Porter Ranch group. Question, 1148.1. I really enjoyed that one. Odor. Have there been any confirmed odor complaints from the Porter Ranch area to AQMD? People have said that they are complaining on Cut Smog line and by online web. Here's a public records act request. I would like to have all records pertaining to notifications, complaints, issues, communications regarding the Southern California gas companies venting and or uncontrolled releases from their Alicio Canyon facility and any odor complaints therefrom. Because we don't know what's happening and we're kind of concerned. The reported venting, which then was translated to an uncontrolled release, first from a well, then from the soil, then from a whole bunch of things. We don't know what's happening. I've seen people on the site without hard hats taking air quality samples with Draeger tubes and things like that. Kind of strange. It was actually documented in one of the videos from the Southern California Gas Company. So here's a real application, 1148.1. Have there been any confirmed complaints? Because there have been complaints, at least online, for the last 10 days. How many complaints have been confirmed? And will the Southern California Gas Company be required to have an odor management plan developed quickly? Oh, by the way, we've asked for, but have not seen, the emergency response and control plan for a gas storage facility with wells. We're kind of concerned, but it will be coming back again probably early next year when Termo wants to apply for 12 new wells on the same site. And odor will become a very important issue. So is 1148.1 in place? Is it operating? And is it doing its job as originally decided? Thank you.
While Mr. Goldsworthy is testifying, would Graciela Grayer come to the microphone? Oh, she was the one who testified? She did a good job. Alexandria, I just saw you turn in your slip there. And would Kent, that's you? You come to the other one.
Okay, my name is Ray Goldsworthy, and public speaking is not my forte, so I'll just read what I wrote and hopefully I'll get my point across. Okay, so good morning, Dr. Burke and members of the governing board. My name is Ray Goldsworthy, and last month I retired from the district with 25 years of service. This morning, I am here simply to say thank you. Looking at the big picture, under the board's leadership, guidance, and direction, the district has really cleaned up the air in our valley. I have lived here my whole life, except for 8 years in the Navy, and I can personally attest to the improvement in air quality. Although hard to believe, the stories you hear about the air in the 50s and 60s when I was growing up are true. From June through September, you couldn't see the mountains. And your lungs ached every night from playing outside during the day. The difference in air quality is like night and day between then and now, and the SCAQMD, under your leadership, is primarily responsible. Okay. I would further like to thank the governing board and the district, especially Leisha, Derek, and Lisa, for supporting our local public schools. On multiple occasions throughout my son and daughter's progression through elementary school, middle and high school, public affairs has contributed to their schools in a variety of ways. This was very much appreciated by the schools, by my family, and by me. I believe in and will continue to support the district's mission, and as some are aware, will be volunteering my time to support the governing board and the AQMD. During my tenure at the district, I gained a wide set of skills and expertise in numerous areas, and I look forward to putting these skills to good use as an unpaid volunteer, assisting the governing board and district wherever possible. However, I will need to delay these volunteer efforts for a short time. My 85-year-old mom is currently experiencing a few medical issues, and caring for her now is my primary duty. Okay. On a more positive note, a couple of tidbits in retirement. Biggest adjustment, getting paid for not working. Completely counterintuitive to my whole life. It just doesn't work. And the biggest unexpected perk, no chain of command. Except for my wife, of course. But basically I can say, you know, what I want, go talk to who I want when I want. So, yeah. She's watching. Yeah. So, in closing, I would like to again say thank you and give the board a little direction. See, there's that perk. No chain of command. I can give the board some direction now, too. Okay. Please accept these Starbucks gift cards and have a cup of coffee, or hot chocolate in Dr. Parker's case. Sit in the patio area, relax, take a deep breath of good air, appreciate what you have accomplished, and give yourself a well-deserved pat on the back. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Can I say?
Nice.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you very much.
Very nice, thank you. Thank you. Dr. Burke, could I just add on a second here? You know, I've worked for a number of different organizations, and I experienced that, gosh, they're still paying me thing. But when somebody walks up to the mic and says, I've been here 25 years, I quit last month, I want to talk to you, I'm always a little worried, you know? But this organization, more than anyone I've ever been around, you hear positive stuff. People really, really like working for you, Barry, and the whole team. And that's a real tribute. It doesn't happen everywhere, and I want to thank the gentleman for taking the time to come tell us that. But he's not the first we've heard it from, and I think it says something about our organization. Thank you.
I don't like working for Barry.
Well, it's kind of hard to follow Starbucks gift cards, but I'll try. My name is Alexandra Nagy. I'm the Southern California organizer with Food and Water Watch. I just want to say thank you to the chairman and the board for having me here for public comment. I just wanted to say, I don't know if you heard the news, but President Obama rejected the Keystone Pipeline this morning, and in his speech, he said that we need to keep it in the ground, and he's talking about keeping fossil fuels in the ground, and I was planning on saying that for the NOx reclaim, but I still think it's relevant because what I do want to talk about is what is happening in Porter Ranch. I want to thank Dr. Tom for elaborating on that earlier. This is day 15, or 16 actually, of a major gas leak at the SoCalGas facility just north of Porter Ranch in the Aliso Canyon storage field. This storage field gets fracked gas from all over the western part of the country. My organization has been working to ban fracking nationally. We succeeded in banning fracking in New York. We've passed a 2-year moratorium on fracking in Maryland. We're working in Colorado and Texas, in places where we get our gas, but it just goes to show the big picture. No matter from the wellhead to the refinery to burning it and bringing it to our homes, there is some sort of impact to public health and the environment. Porter Ranch residents are getting physically ill from this gas leak, burning eyes, shortness of breath, nausea, vomiting. Children are getting sick, pets are getting sick. This is a really serious issue, and I want to thank South Coast Air Quality Management District for their timely response. They were the first agency that we called, and were on the scene immediately and have been completely transparent and forthcoming with residents, which we greatly appreciate, because we did not see that kind of responsiveness from the SoCal Gas Company. When we called their hotline for 3 days, they denied the leak. They said that it was just routine maintenance, routine flaring, routine releases, I think is more how they characterized it. And it didn't come until organizing over the weekend from Save Porter Ranch, calling on Supervisor Antonovich, calling on our elected officials to do something. And they finally admitted it, but it's still not enough. I think it just goes to show the character of this industry that doesn't want to fade away, but we are coming to the end of a fossil fuel era, and it continues to pollute and poison our communities. They need to be transparent. They need to be held accountable. Supervisor Antonovich, we're really calling on you to help us hold the SoCal Gas Company accountable to the leak, to the methane emissions, to the sickness that the community is facing. Visit your constituents, talk to them. I know your response is the SoCal Gas Company says it's safe, but residents are saying that is completely untrue. We need to get to the bottom of this. Thank you very much.
After public comment, what AQMD is doing and our staff's assisting them.
Thank you.
Thank you. I just have a brief public comment. Thank you, gentlemen and ladies. Kent Minot, again, staff for the Sierra Club. I just wanted to comment because when I came in, there was a presentation on the big screen about the work you're doing to stimulate electric driving and bring electric driving infrastructure into low-income communities. I thought it was fantastic. I'm glad to see that. I'm an electric motorist myself, and I drove some people here that you saw in the gallery here previously in my electric car, and I'm charging it up out front. Thank you for providing those chargers. But I wanted to point out that electric motorists find the current level of electric charging infrastructure that's publicly available to be inadequate. A lot of chargers are out of service. A lot of chargers are crowded. If you're out and around in your electric car doing business in the crowded streets of LA, you panic a little bit if you really need to find a charger. And when I showed up here this morning, I saw all the chargers were taken. Fortunately, there was a woman who was unplugging her car, and I said, "Can I take your space?" And so it handled itself very quickly. But it's important to remember, I've noticed that in, I think it's SB 1285, which provides for electric charging infrastructure in low-income communities, and they've got a great provision for electric chargers in multi-unit dwellings, and that's great, but that's still where people live, not when they're out and around. If you've got to do more than one thing during the day, you've got to have publicly available charging infrastructure.
Statistics show that 90% of electric car charging is done at home.
Yes, but it's that 10% that is essential for making sure that it can be.
I drive an electric car myself, so.
Who
do
you think ought to pay for those charging stations? Well, many of those charging stations are commercial operations already. Some of the charging stations in my neighborhood, I live in a fairly wealthy neighborhood in Sherman Oaks, and as soon as I got my car, there were 6 charging opportunities available, several of them absolutely free. 4 of them were paid for by the Fashion Square Mall, 2 by the Department of Water and Power. Now, in low-income communities, there is no charging infrastructure. If you look at Boyle Heights, if you look at South Central, if you look at Pacoima, there are big holes. I've got a plug share on my iPhone.
Well, I can tell you from myself personally on the board, is I've locked horns with Edison on this issue for quite a while, and things are starting to change with Edison. Edison has had their head up their glove compartment.
You needn't fill it in.
Their head up their charger, and they've removed some people and bringing new people in. my opinion is, the people that are supplying the electricity and making the money on it ought to be building the charging stations. And yeah, and we think we've got them got to pull their head out of their charger, and I think they've seen the light. But we can totally agree with you. But our relationship with Edison is now beginning to improve, and maybe we'll see more and more of that.
Oh, that's good to hear. It's just a couple of points, and that is that charging infrastructure needs to precede the adoption.
Let me continue on Mary Yates.
Okay.
That I happen to agree that the people who saw the power should put them in, but the people who regulate the power need to make sure that they service every community.
Yes, that's the point. Yeah, exactly right.
And that's not here.
Yeah, no, the overwhelming
That's not
majority
here.
of the
That's
chargers
a
have
different
been.
location.
Yeah.
But I agree with you 100%.
Great.
Mr. Chair, can I make a comment following up
Sure.
on your comments? If you look at item number 14 on the agenda today, and because we've looked at this issue in the past when we planned for it, item 14 was approval of a number of projects for the Mobile Source Air Pollution Reduction Committee, which we approved. And you look there, a number of the cities at our initiation got grants to install electric vehicle charging stations. When you talk about poor cities, I don't say, well, cities that need El Monte, Placentia, on down the list, all the way down, you see money we've given from our car registration fees for in neighborhoods, in cities. So when you're out there driving, look for these cities in the next 6 months, because they're going to be out there.
Okay, great. Thanks so much. Yeah, good. Thanks for the conversation.
I'm sorry. Supervisor Antonovich?
Could we ask Mr. Wallerstein to comment about what is happening in the Granada Hills, San Fernando Valley, Porter Ranch area relative to the gas leak?
Be happy to. We've been very involved, also at the bequest of Supervisor Antonovich. And so one event was last Wednesday night. There was a community meeting. We were present with the supervisor's staff and other agencies that are involved. We've had our field staff out monitoring the situation, making sure our rules are complied with. We've looked at the air measurements from within the community and consulted with an outside medical expert regarding the concentrations and what risks that might pose to public health. The Southern California Edison needed a special drill rig to be able to repair this leak, and the rig is on site, and my understanding from our staff was that they would start the repair either late yesterday or this morning. And so what we have here is an underground storage area for natural gas that developed a leak. This isn't like the production well sites that we've been working on recently and where the board's adopted rule amendments. There is definitely escape of the natural gas. As the board knows, natural gas, if it's just pure methane, it doesn't have an odor. So an odorant is added. It's called mercaptan. And so what the community is smelling is the mercaptan odorant that's there. So for safety purposes, that you can detect the natural gas, look at the concentrations, and the concentrations in the neighborhood are not at levels that pose an explosion risk, because the community members are a long distance from the site. And so we're hopeful that they'll be able to get the repairs underway and bring this episode quickly to a close. I did put in a call to the CEO of the gas company late yesterday. I'm hoping to speak with him today about the situation and emphasize, not that he doesn't already know, but the urgency to get this matter resolved.
Thank you.
I assume that now we are going to close session.
No closed session.
No closed session. Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for coming, and this adjourns the South Coast Air Quality Management District Board meeting.